Hello virtual dreamers, Gregory here. I believe a Sword Art Online game is going to be either released or will have a tie-in with the canonical release date in 2022. With the experiences I've had over the past few years in game development, VR, engineering, and engaging with the Sword Art Online franchise, I'm going to share with you what my expectations for what a 2022 title would be like. Let's kick things off with the release date. While I specified 2022, I haven't solidified a date here because of three reasons. There are two dates for Sword Art Online's release in the story. The realities of launching games is different in the real world as is compared to that of the narrative of Sword Art Online, and the fact that the chances of a real-world SAO incident being allowed or even being doable are practically zero. In Sword Art Online, the game launched physically on some form of cartridge media for the Nerve Gear on October 31st, 2022, on a VR platform that had been released earlier, and with only 10,000 physical copies available and a 6-day window between people getting their hands on the game and the opening of the servers on November 6th, 2022. If Bandai Namco, the publishers that currently hold the Sword Art Online license, wanted to release the game as closely to the show's presented manner as possible, they could very well do the same thing. But with the way the games market is today, there's no way they could afford to do this without changing several details. First off, there's no way they can sell any content on a disc or physical media that far ahead of the official opening day for the servers in today's media landscape. Data miners and pirates would immediately get to eking out any bits of data they could from any of the files provided. That would mean that the only thing that they could give out for the game ahead of the server's opening day would be, at best, a digital code or activation key for the game itself. Also, it doesn't really require that much saying, but no company in their right minds would release a game with only 10,000 copies at launch. Nerve Gear be damned. So, by nature, the release has to change its style to better fit into reality standards, and thankfully it wouldn't require that many tweaks. The move I expect Bandai Namco to take here is to use the source material as inspiration and better tailor it to modern standards. They could emulate the delayed launch by having a special collector's edition of the game released October 31st with a bunch of nice goodies like maybe a demo disc or cartridge that functions online, character figurines, or replica props like a Nerve Gear head-mounted display shell or prop. That kind of item could be released at a limited 10,000 unit quantity, and the rest of the player base could still purchase the game normally in stores or online, with just boxes containing activation codes or digital pre-orders. This keeps the spirit of the launch without having to abandon all business sense, so it's more or less what I'm expecting out of the launch itself. But what about the more important aspects here, like the game itself? Scope in games today on anything but the weakest of platforms is not decided by the technical limitations of our technology, but rather by the size of the check behind it and the amount of quality the developers want to put in. To make a game like Sword Art Online that isn't completely soulless drivel would require hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars to fund. While Sword Art Online as a media franchise is undoubtedly one of the biggest anime has to offer right now, the performance of its current games haven't warranted more than the, at best, AA development budgets and teams they have received so far. Infinity Moment, Hollow Fragment, Lost Song, Hollow Realization, Integral Factor, and Phantom Bullet are not AAA titles in an echelon comparable to the Japanese juggernauts like Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest, let alone the Western Goliaths like Grand Theft Auto or World of Warcraft. So expecting Bandai Namco to basically bet their corporate net worth on a single title in a franchise that hasn't proven itself to be worthy of such backing would be lunacy on their part, unless the Alicization arc in Season 3 and the Netflix series take over the media landscape and Sword Art Online becomes a money printer on the level of Pokemon, One Piece, and the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I wouldn't expect much more than a modest increase in scope for Sword Art Online's 2022 effort. But what does a modest increase entail here? Well, I'd say a pretty looking initial offering with the progressive deliveries in the cards. We'd likely see floors turned into batches that are released as expansions, not unlike how Ironclad is being recreated in the anime post the Fairy's Dance arc. This allows them to technically deliver on the experience of the show initially, put more development resources into visuals and gameplay features to leave a better marketing impression, and a smaller loss to recoup should the game underperform. As for what we should expect to see at launch, I honestly wouldn't expect to see more than 10 floors at the very most. Really, I wouldn't be surprised if they poured all of their efforts into no more than 2 or 3 floors to try and leverage their budget and stretch out the lifespan by keeping our expectations low going forward. But then again, what exactly is this gameplay here that people would be looking forward to? No doubt, the odds are that this will be a title that offers support for the standards of VR of its time. Keyword being support. MMOs and online games as a whole depend heavily on having large communities to survive and thrive. While an indie effort like Orbis VR can survive with the relatively small numbers of VR's current niche, an effort funded by a large publisher like Bandai Namco using an IP like Sword Art Online would struggle to keep its numbers up to a sufficient level even if we start to see VR platforms with over 10 million users like what Oculus recently proposed would be the critical mass for VR support floodgates to start opening. With that in mind, the most likely approach I'd expect from Bandai Namco here would be to make the game playable with or without a VR setup, but to have specific gameplay features or mode that allow for more standard VR gameplay to be considered, like real swordplay based VR duels or specific VR only player servers and filters. Finally, for the gameplay itself, it will be defined by its 2 weakest links: the nature of online gameplay and the reality of the modern VR scene. Physics-based combat interactions probably aren't happening online anytime soon, as they open up too much room for variance in each player's experience. The majority of modern games, on or offline, tend to use more animation and response tree-based systems for combat, rather than physics due to how unreliable they can be, so you can only imagine that a VR MMO wouldn't fare that much better. Even with a few years' time, the probability of this changing as drastically as would be necessary for something like Sword Art Online to happen is very, very slim. It doesn't help that even if we had perfect physics-based combat, the nature of VR controls today being motion control based basically kills the notion, as we have no technology that could be made broadly available that can even pretend to provide the kind of force feedback VR demands. In addition, being motion control based means that locomotion will have to be handled by artificial locomotion schemes like jogging in place or analog stick motion, since adding in teleportation locomotion solutions just ruin the appeal of Sword Art Online's combat aesthetic entirely. All in all, if we really want a good preview of what we should expect, having a look at something like Sword Art Online The Beginning would be an optimistic view of what we can expect from a 2022 Sword Art Online game. Beyond that point now, everyone, we're just going to be going over the obvious. The rest of Sword Art Online's RPG systems are bog standard, and barring the addition of a few microtransaction systems, the floor expansions for DLC, and some anime tie-ins, Sword Art Online as an MMORPG wouldn't be all that different from the experience the anime showed at all. The concurrent player count per server would likely be lower, as no one's CPU or game engine is looking to handle 10,000 simultaneous avatars with their own designs and motions, and the lack of a death game as an impetus kind of negates the need to bother with that kind of a situation anyway. Even if they chose to keep the scale at a level matching that of the canon description, with things such as a 10-kilometer diameter for the base floor, the game would just end up filled to the brim with procedurally generated fields and dungeons, only getting minor handcrafted tweaks here and there to try and mitigate the repetitiveness that tends to be produced in these solutions. In the end, Sword Art Online 2022 will likely be just another licensed property MMORPG that has some VR features. Well everyone, that is what I'm expecting out of Sword Art Online in 2022. Can this even really be called Sword Art Online at all? Is this what we were wishing for when we saw Kirito say, "Link, start!" for the first time? I don't think so, but my efforts and studies are telling me that expecting more than this is only going to lead to more disappointment and bitterness, and I don't particularly care to add more of either of those things into my life, much less intentionally. But if that's the case, what am I still so hyped up for in 2022? You could say I've chosen to take a negative and turn it into a positive by actively taking control of my expectations and by taking action to sate my wishes by other means. If you've managed to enjoy games like Sword Art Online Infinity Moment, Lost Song, Hollow Realization, and Integral Factor, don't let my expectations get you down. To the contrary, I'd say the game I've described so far would still be the best Sword Art Online game made to date, and anyone who managed to enjoy the prior games would probably love the 2022 game all the more. For me though, I'm just a bit more greedy. I want to feel the wind on my face as I rush out of town, smelling the grass in the early morning as I run about grassy hills. To muster my strength as I raise the weight of my sword and head towards my foe, hacking at their body, penetrating through the resistance of their flesh, and to feel the earned impact of being launched back should I make any mistake. I want to feel the sensation of falling and rising as I jump up and down in victory after a long-fought battle. I want to feel the satisfaction of knowing I lived to see a fantasy, a dream committed to paper, turn to reality within my life. Barring some kind of major catastrophe or the end of this wonderful era of rapid and constant technological and computational progress, I expect the things I want will be available to me eventually. But as far as a Sword Art Online that matches the vision presented in the anime is concerned, I expect that the only people that can bring that Sword Art Online to life will be those who have been wishing for it in the first place. When will we end up bringing it up then? Well, even I don't know what to expect there. Thank you very much for watching this video, everyone. Please remember to rate, comment, share, and subscribe if you liked the video. I will be producing more VR content in the future, hopefully with more content that shows how exactly I intend to match my own expectations via my own creations, rather than letting the world around me define what I should want. Thank you very much again, everyone, for watching this video. This has been Gregory, logging out.